Okay, so here's the answer to the first question that I got related to the lecture for today. Um, Somebody asked, how do we know where we have to make the cuts, like where the points are where we change from one free body diagram and one set of functions, really there's subfunctions for the internal loads, and where we change to another subfunction. These subfunctions are the individual things that make up these piecewise functions that define the internal loads: tension, shear force, bending moment, torque. Okay, so there are, so the places where those subfunctions change. We're going to be looking for point loads. That's made up of a few things. That includes, point forces, point couples, and then a torque for us is, just a couple along the x-axis. So I'll include that too, torques. So anywhere you have one of these, a point force or a point couple or a point torque, that's a point where you have to switch to a new free body diagram and use Newton's laws again. And the other place where you have to do that is if the function representing the distributed load changes. So any point where the distributed load function changes. Okay, so for example, if we have a beam like this, and let's say that it's attached to the wall here, and let's say that we have a distributed load function like this. That's supposed to be a uniform distributed load that height's the same the whole way. And then let's say we also have a couple here like this. Okay. And let me give some dimensions. So let me say that this distance is 0.5 meters. This distance is 0.25 meters. And then this one is 0.25 meters. Then if you think of a free body diagram, you have the distributed load here. You have the couple here, and then at the wall, the connection with the wall, that's a fixed joint. So that means we have some unknown, force vector, and we have some unknown reaction couple there. All right, so the points where these subfunctions are going to change. So if we consider, the endpoints here, okay, so those, you start at the start point, you end at the end point. But between those, the distributed load function changes here. So that's a place where these subfunctions are going to change. There's a point couple here, so that's a point where they're going to change. And so that means we're going to do, so how many cuts are we going to do? We're going to do a first cut that represents x values between 0 and 0.5, because 0.5 is where that distributed load function changes. Our second cut is going to represent x values between 0.5 and 0.75, because 0.75 is where that point couple is. And then our third cut is going to go between 0.75 and the end of the beam, which is in this case 1 meter. Okay, so all I did to find where we have to do these different free body diagrams is I found the points where the distributed load function changes, and I found the points where loads are applied at, point loads. One thing that you have to be careful about is you have to think about the distributed loads before you represent them as point loads, right? Because eventually we're going to do a free body diagram where every distributed load we represent as a single force vector. We do that using the centroids and stuff. That's what this last lecture was talked about. But if you thought about it that way, you would get these points wrong. Because for this uniform distributed load, the point force would be right at the middle of that region, which would be x equals 0.25. And then you'd think of that as a point load, and you get different answers. You could try it both ways and see that the answers will be different. So before you represent distributed loads as point forces, you have to think about where that distributed load function, starts and ends, and that's going to determine where you have to draw new free body diagrams, use Newton's laws again. Okay, well, hopefully that was clear. Let me know if you have any questions about that, and talk to you soon.